Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Carricker and welcome to my presentation. Today I'm going to talk about troubleshooting a compost pile. This is a great guide for new composters who may be experiencing difficulties maintaining the perfect compost. I'll discuss two main problems with composting, their most likely causes, and then some ways to fix it. Problem number one is that the compost smells rotten. Compost should smell earthy. So if it smells anything other than that, then there's an issue or some imbalances going on. So here are some potential causes for problem one. There are many possibilities as to why a compost pile is not smelling as it should. The compost pile that has a smell problem could mean one or more of the following scenarios. It may either be too wet, contain too many green materials. It may be that the brown materials added are overshredded, or there's not enough oxygen in the compost. Solutions for problem one. Oxygenation is a really important issue that needs to be fixed. Make sure you're turning your compost pile frequently. Green materials such as grass clippings or food scraps, for example, can get clumped up. So when brown materials aren't fully distributed throughout the compost, that's where the unpleasant smells can be an issue. Greens and browns should be of all shapes, sizes, and textures. If you're overshredding brown materials, they cannot do their job of creating airspace to keep the compost dry. So keep many brown materials in your compost pile coarse, bulky, and dry. Lastly, if your compost is too wet, then you might not be covering your tumbler or your pile with a tarp, so it's a good idea to do so. This will keep the heavy downpours from leaking into the pile, which is usually how they end up getting too wet. I know from personal experience that you need to have a tarp over your tumbler as well. Also keep in mind that sunny to partly sunny areas are ideal composting conditions. And here I just have some examples of the coarse, dry, brown amendments. Dead leaves and wood chips are good examples. You can also use corrugated cardboard or cardboard toilet paper and paper towel rolls. Here is a quick composting tip if you were wondering what the moisture content of your compost should be. Well, you really won't know unless you grab a handful and assess the moisture in your pile. The moisture content should be equivalent to a sponge that has been wrung out according to the LSU Ag Center. Problem number two, the compost pile is too dry. So here are some potential causes. Again, either not having a cover like a tarp over your composting station, or that there are too many brown materials. Solutions to problem two. Having a cover over your compost pile not only provides protection from the heavy rainfall, but it also helps retain moisture that is produced from the green materials. If I have a tarp over my compost pile and I were still having a dry compost, I would probably amend the compost pile with greens before adding water to the pile. So the general rule for browns to greens ratio is about 30-1. So if that hasn't fixed the issue, then I'd consider adding water to the pile. Adding water might be an easier task if you have a tumbler, but if you have a traditional composting pile with layers, you won't have to throw it out, but you will have to take it apart and start layering it back into the container that you're composting in and add a little bit of water between each layer. Preferably if you add a layer and then have a hose with a nozzle where the water can be sprinkled and evenly distributed between each layer, that would be great. And just keep adding a layer and sprinkling water until you're done. And here are just some examples of green amendments, grass clippings, fruit and vegetable scraps, and coffee grounds. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank y'all for listening.